All right. I will make you the host, Kaz.
Sure.
Well, you can do what you need to do and stuff like that. So, all right. I'm going to mute me. And if you have any questions, shout out. Otherwise, we got a couple minutes left and you can have people introduce themselves and there you go.
Okay. I will introduce myself in just a minute. When we start, I'd like to hear driver support 1 for Zoom, activate service. Am I doing this? Braden?
Yes.
I tried to do this before. And whatever I type on my laptop doesn't appear when it asks for my email. I don't have that.
I don't know. I mean, if you need, I can get Shelley to come up and troubleshoot.
Well, I'm just going to do the class.
Okay.
And it looks like we are at 12:59. If anyone else is having difficulty, I don't see the messages.
Kaz, if you click on the chat button, you should be able to see the
If I click on what?
The chat button all the way at the bottom.
No, I've got it.
There you go.
And I know where you're from.
You do? How are you?
I'm fine.
She's from Kaid. Don't let her fool you.
Can I be a hybrid for today? A Kaid Arnholder?
I was going to try to make a bad pun, which I'm known for. I'm a bit nervous, so I don't know if they're going to come out. For those of you who don't know, I'm Baroness Casamira Yoviolny, and I'm from Loxollan in Artemisia, which is mundanely Salt Lake. And we are going to talk about how to be a frugal cook. Braden, I have no idea how to get my written information up on the screen.
If you go down to the bottom list of things you can do, share screen should be in the middle.
Aha. So, there we go. Except it's not doing it. Braden, can you make that happen?
Sorry, what was that? I was dealing with.
I have no idea how to get.
So, do you have the list of commands either along the top or the bottom? There you go. Now you're sharing your screen. Ta-da!
But that's not my
move over to the other document. Switch to the other document.
I don't know how to do that.
We can see your browser right now.
I don't want you to do that.
Okay.
So when you go to share screen, you should be able to control what you share. You should be able to pick whatever it is. Or switch over to the document and get off there, minimize your browser and see if you can make the other one appear.
Okay, it said stop share, and it's Braden Wolf, or Brad Wolf.
You share one more time. and you should be able to pick what you're going to share out of that list. You're muted. That doesn't help either.
So is my handout supposed to be showing up right now?
Well, so when you hit share screen, it should give you the option to pick what you're going to share, and then you should click on the handout.
It doesn't show the handout.
Is the handout up? You have it open?
Hang on.
Are you good, Kaz? You got it? You finding it?
Now I've lost the meeting.
Well, you're still here.
I don't see it. That's why I thought I sent it up ahead of time.
The handout, sure, but as far as sharing it, so if you have the handout open.
I have the handout open, but it's open in Word.
That's fine. So now you can go over to Zoom. And do the share screen and try to find and just share the Word document. That should be what you need to do.
I have no idea what's going on. Can you see me?
Yes.
As an alternative, Kaz, the link to the handout was posted in the chat, so we can at least all follow along on the handout while you talk.
Okay.
I open this.
Yeah, it should be a PDF link through Google Drive. I pulled it out of the class listing spreadsheet. It's only one page, is that correct, Your Excellency?
Nope, it's several.
1 of 5.
That's
Let me
it.
try
5
again.
pages long.
It's not letting me in. I apologize, everyone. Do you see me?
Yes.
Great. I'm blind, but I'm going to go ahead and start, and maybe that will be fine. The only thing I'm seeing is Morgan right now. Thank you, Morgan.
No.
I'm Baroness Casamira. I'm member of the Order of the Laurel, which I got for calligraphy, cordials, and puns. So I'm totally qualified from cooking, except that I took that up as an alternate thing that I do. I'm also a pelican and a griffin of Artemisia. So what I'm going to talk about is how to be frugal in choosing what you're going to do for a feast. I did a feast December 7th in Loch Salin, which is mundanely Salt Lake, and it was a Mediterranean feast. And I think the menu is in bold on the first part of my handout. And the first thing I want to talk about is what can be made ahead versus what I felt had to be done on the day of. All of the things in the openings, the hummus, the flatbread, the olives, marinated garlic, cucumbers, mushrooms, were all done ahead of time. And they were just plated on the day when we got there. The next remove was the pomegranate chicken and the Mediterranean vegetables. Those were to be done on the day of the event. And then the lamb stew and the rice for gluten-free folk and the Turkish coleslaw were made in advance, or were done that day. The dessert had pizzelles and a whipped cream ricotta cheese mixture. The pizzelles were all done in advance. They're very time consuming, but the ricotta cheese was made that day. The stuffed dates stuffed with, sure, it's a goat cheese. Those were done in advance and kept refrigerated. I had pistachio nuts just to put out with the plate of dessert. And my biggest make in advance was the Turkish delight. And I had never made Turkish delight before. So there were things that I had to go shopping for, and there were things that were made in advance so that I could get to the feast and it would be fine. So what comes first, the menu or the feast fee? And you're looking at a couple of different things when you have a feast fee and when you set it. My Reeve doesn't want to handle singles. And so instead of $12, she wants me to choose $10 or $15. And I chose 10 for this one. And the feast was profitable. The Verity did make money on it. Most of the folks admitted that it was underpriced, but I wanted to encourage as many people as possible to be able to attend the feast. I kept it lower. So with a $15 feast fee, how much money can I spend? Well, I figure we're going to have about 60 people sign up to eat the feast, and 10 of those will be children, and we don't charge children for eating feast. And we also comp the crown, and the Baron and Baroness can be comped, etc. So I figured on 5 comps. So that meant we had a total of 45 people paying the feast fee, and I'm going to use $15 here. And so that was $675. Now, that was my budget. And I know from experience that the day of the event, there's always something that has to be done.
Some for breakfast.
You know, it happens. We ran out of salt, if you can believe that. Had to have somebody go out and get salt. And so my goal was to stay under the $600, which I did. Another thing that is sort of basic knowledge, but not well known maybe, is the size of servings for an American party. And I took these from a website that's listed at the very end of the handout. So if I'm going to be serving a main dish, meat, fish, poultry, etc., how much do I buy per person? And this is something that you either overbuy or underbuy unless you do a good calculation. And the second side to that is if you are serving multiple courses, by the time they get to the second course, are they eating as much as they would for the first course? And the answer is no. So you can decrease your portion size for the second and any subsequent removes that you want to prepare. The serving size for grains is 1.5 ounces. I found that what people will serve themselves depends upon the size of the spoon or serving equipment that is provided. And so this feast was served with tables of 8, and we had portions, a bowl for every table. And I made sure there was an appropriate sized serving spoon that was put into that. Plus, when people were given the portion for 8, they kind of knew that was to go around the whole table, as opposed to coming back and asking the cooks for more. As a matter of fact, we didn't have a lot more. We tended to serve just about everything we had. For vegetables, they suggest 4 ounces, and pasta, 4 ounces for a main dish or less for a side dish. And in this case, I made pasta and I had more than enough, because when I was making it, I didn't weigh it because it was wet, not dry. And I made 3 batches and I could have gotten by with 2. Bread is another thing. If you're serving bread, and in this case we had flat bread, it was served with the initial openings. And the bread was, if people are sitting there and they've been starving, they're going to eat more bread than if they're not starving to death. And knowing how SCA folks, especially fighters, might be, I tend to overdo on the bread so that I don't run out. So when I started planning this meal, I had 2 basic meats in mind: the chicken, for the pomegranate chicken, and the lamb. Now, my local grocery store chains is Smith's, which is a Kroger type store, Walmart, Reams, Winco, Costco, Amazon and specialty markets, and a store that's called NPS. It started out as a damaged or out of date grocery store, and it's got variable inventory. I went several times before the feast just to see what they had and then to buy things. And I couldn't count on the fact that 2 days before my event, they might have something in stock. I did find fresh mushrooms for $1 a pound, which was amazing because it's normally, what, $3 a pound or more here. But you have to, if you see it there and you can freeze it or store it, that's great. I find specialty markets like Sprouts or organic markets a little bit more expensive, and I don't tend to use those for my everyday eating, and so they're not top on my list when I'm looking for something. But I might go there if I was looking, say, for falafel. If for any of you who were on the last video that Braden did. Let's see. Let's look at the parts of the chicken. If indeed you're looking at serving chicken, what are the price variables? And you can go from boneless, skinless breasts at $4.99 a pound at Costco. And I got these from the web this week. Walmart had $4.46 a pound, and a discount store in this area had $1.28 a pound. And you can see that the price for boneless, skinless thighs is less, drumsticks is less, and the whole chicken is a little bit more than just the drumsticks. But if you're looking at whole chicken, you also have to consider that you have the necessity of taking apart that chicken and getting it into pieces. And what are you going to do with the back and the neck and all that other stuff? So I wasn't really interested in whole chickens for this event. I did, however, have, I do look at the prices in the flyers for the local grocery stores. And more of the stores are doing online flyers as opposed to them appearing in my mailbox. So you may have to search a little bit. But the online flyer for one store had chicken leg quarters. So it was the leg and the thigh at 38 cents a pound. And I knew I wasn't going to beat that price. That, however, was at the end of October, which means I had to find freezer space. And very fortunately, one of the ladies who was in the barony had just moved into a house and had extra freezer space. And so I borrowed her freezer. And the chicken sat in the freezer until then. And on another trip to NPS store, I found the lamb. Now, lamb averages about $11 a pound. The bulk frozen without the bone is $9 a pound. I know you can get lamb at some Costco stores for about $6 a pound. And I wish maybe I had known that, because that would have saved me a lot of work on the Friday before the event. But I did find 2 legs of lamb at NPS for $4 a pound, $3.99, but I'm writing the handout. It was less than $80 for the 2 legs of lamb. That was quite a buy. But I did spend about 4 hours getting the meat off of the bone on the day of the event. So it took me quite a bit of time, but I saved a lot of money. And also for that, I needed the freezer for that, and those fit in one of my freezers. I have extra freezers because I've bought freezers for other events that I was Feastocrat for, and now I'm trying to empty one of them to give it to my son, but I haven't succeeded in that, because if there's room in the freezer and there's a bargain, I tend to buy it. Anyway, so having procured the chicken and the lamb, I decided that since pomegranate chicken, which was not something my barony had had in, I don't remember them actually serving it. Pomegranates are in season in December, and I was able to find the pomegranate molasses I needed in an Indian food store. I served that because it was less expensive than the lamb. So you want to keep in mind, serve your cheaper item first and have people fill up on that, and then serve your more expensive item. There were several things that had make versus buy decisions, and I keep clicking on something that gives me a dog food commercial. This is silly. Anyway, make versus buy decisions. I I just got back so I can see myself. Thank you. And okay. Okay, now I'm still trying to share screen here.
You've muted yourself, Your Excellency. There you go.
Okay. And then how do I make it so people see me?
We can see you right now.
Okay, that's great. Because you are my main picture right now. Is that what's going on for everybody else? Who's the main person?
It's a setting where you can go to speaker view or gallery view in your Zoom, but everybody's got their own settings. So just keep talking.
Thank you. Okay. I wanted Turkish delight because I thought that would be wonderful. And if people have two big things, I thought for the dessert with the pizzelles and the cream, and we ended up serving the pizzelles. They looked like cannolis. And we had 3 of those put into a metal shot glass container that had the cream in it, so that there was one for every person. And then we had the other items of the dessert, the stuffed dates and nuts and the Turkish delight around the main platter that was serving those. And so I thought the Turkish delight would be a sweet. It would be different. And I had absolutely no idea how to make it. But when I went to look online, it was too expensive for me to buy enough for everybody to have what they needed. So I ended up learning how to make it. I was able to do this 2 to 3 weeks in advance and store them very nicely. The ability to store things in Salt Lake where it's dry helped a lot. It wasn't very humid. And I ended up trying 2 different recipes. One of them used gelatin and it tasted good, but it just didn't store very well. It didn't hold its shape. It wasn't firm. And so I went with the cornstarch method. And the one thing, I followed the recipe, but they told me how much of the flavoring to put in. And because of because their flavoring, whatever they had used, was different from the flavoring that I had. The rose water and the orange were a little bit weak. So I decided on my 3rd try, and yes, I know what flavor it was. The 3rd try, oh, the green one with the mint, was much, or the lime rather. I used a commercial flavoring that they sell in the grocery stores for lollipops and cake decorating, and I really hit it, and everyone said I got the flavoring right on that one. Okay, the cost was under $25, which is definitely reasonable, and I wish I could have made more. In fact, I thought about making some just because I was reviewing this, but it was fun. One of the things that may be a challenge for people to do frugally is bread. And bread is often purchased because making bread for 60 people the day before the event isn't really an option for everyone. But Solstice had flatbread, and my apprentice, Dame Hildy, was able to make the flatbread ahead of time. And we'll get back to it. She made some of it gluten-free because we did have gluten-free folks signing up for the event. And she was able to put them in aluminum foil and heat them the day of the event so that they were wonderful. Previously, I've had an apprentice who was known for her bread making, and she has made the bread the day before. And that's all that she provided for the feast. And so she was able to do that. You can also make the bread ahead of time and freeze it and then thaw it the day before. I have had my own bread and frozen it and taken it out, and that seems to work, but it's not necessarily something that I have freezer space for, since my freezers are all jammed. Bread can run as much as $2 to $6 a loaf, depending on where you get it. And no, I don't consider Wonder Bread acceptable for a feast. So I would tend to go for more of the artisan type breads that are more like homemade medieval bread. So watch that item for your budget. 25 pounds of flour and whatever goes in it is a lot cheaper yourself than buying it, but you know what labor and what restrictions you have. When I put out a menu, I usually put down seasonal vegetables, because the menu I'm starting to work on 4 to 6 months in advance. And what's available today is not necessarily what's going to be available on the month that I'm doing my feast. And it's very hard. It's often difficult for people to sit there and think, okay, what's in period in December? Well, cabbage is always available. And what else? And so by making it period vegetables, I'm able to come up with something that matches the theme of my feast, but isn't necessarily as expensive as trying to get fresh peas in December, because they're very expensive, even if you go to the discount places. How am I doing for time? I'm racing. Okay. At this point, I want to remind people to make sure that you put in chat who you are, if you want credit for the Artesian University, and where you're from. And then I'm going to go on to talking about special diets. I know in my barony, I have some gluten-free people. I have some people who are allergic to nuts. I have some diabetics. And those are the main ones that I'm aware of. I do know that there are people who are vegan. And that comes up because my crown didn't tell me that they were getting rid of meat until after I had planned the feast. And so I ended up finding that out and adapting. But I have no ability the day of the event to make arrangements for special diets. I will, in the announcement where people are signing up to come to the feast, ask if there are any allergies. I have an allergy to rabbit, and it's really silly because I've only had rabbit twice, and I've been offered it several times in the SCA, and I just know that I have to avoid that particular dish. However, folks with combinations of allergies, I have a very hard time dealing with a gluten-free, lactose-free vegan. That's not something that I tend to cook for. Um, but if we have a lady who is allergic to onions, and I made a separate crock pot full of the lamb stew with no onions in it so that she could eat that feast. And I'm willing to do that if I know about it in advance. But don't expect anyone to accommodate you on the day of the event for a special allergy. So when you plan your feast, keep these things in mind. You have an option. You can ignore food allergies and serve what you do and give an expensive or give a complete list of all of the ingredients and let the folks choose whether or not they want to eat either the feast or that specific dish. I much prefer, especially with the gluten-free or the nut-free or whatever, make only enough of that specific item for an individual or for the number of people who are nut-free or gluten-free. So if I'm making a quiche and my pie dough has gluten in it, I can make the quiche filling without a pie dough or make an almond-based pie dough. And I'm going to make one or two of these. But if I made it for everyone that way, A, it tastes different. Not something I found in period that people were doing that. And B, it's more expensive. And I'm a frugal person. And so I want people to enjoy the feast. And I will accommodate this in advance. And I do have plenty of almond flour on hand for my next event. When I was told that the king and queen decided not to eat meat, I did buy some sole or fillet of fish that I put in the broiler with lemon. No, I didn't do anything very fancy about it. I bought the fish for the two of them. I was told early about a third lady who was also not eating meat, and I was able to serve it to those three people. Someone came up after the feast and said, oh, well, I didn't eat any of the meat. And it was like, because she was vegan. And I says, you didn't tell me in advance. And she says, well, there was plenty of other things to eat. So that's how that one went down. Oh, typical feast thoughts is my next. I'm going to open this up. Does anyone have a question?
I've got a quick question.
Good.
Is there a suggestion for finding bulk spices? I know that I found them at Sprouts, which isn't the greatest place, but they're the only ones I found that have bulk spices. So I only get spices there, and I get everything else elsewhere. Do you have any
Okay,
suggestions?
and where are you from?
New Mexico.
Okay. Do you have the Chinese grocery store is where I tend to get most of my spices, and also an Indian grocery store, because they come packaged with the Indian or the Chinese labeling on it, and they are super cheap compared to Sprouts or Smith's or any of the places. The spices at a lot of the, I'm thinking of Penzeys or Auntie Arwin's, that's great, but that's not an, well, it is every day here now that we have a Penzeys. But the Chinese grocery store, if I want cumin, I will pay for, the bottle that you get at Smith's, the tall bottle. I might pay $6 or $8, And for $3, I can get a cellophane package with a quart's worth of spice. So look for your Oriental markets or ethnic markets and see if they have it. Again,
Okay.
the big difference will be the packaging.
Right.
It won't be fancy. And I much rather pay for the spice than the package. Good question.
Definitely. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Another thing that's really good about buying at those markets is that because it's so used in the cuisine, the spices are fresher than something where if you're getting a slightly unusual spice for Americans, it might be sitting on the shelf for months before it's ever moved. Whereas those spices, they're constantly moved.
Thank you. I agree.
I have a question for you.
Wonderful.
So one of the things I've wanted to try is a day board presentation. How do you make that cheap or frugal, I should say?
I'm not sure what you are considering for your day board, so that may impact my answer. But
Sure.
I would do a day board because I've just sort of run into that. I would have individual quiches
Okay.
that you can make in a muffin tin so that they're supported by the muffin liner, and you can have those individual, and these things can be made and frozen in advance. I'm not sure what your typical day board looks like. Does it have hot items like soup?
I've not seen one here, to be quite
Okay.
honest.
Okay.
We do, this tends to be either a buffet or a sit down. So we do have we have at our 12th night celebration, the last couple of years have had a version of it with just the desserts, which was really cool. But I've not actually seen one, and I really love the idea of them because you get a little taste of everything without having to have a big messy plate. So
my thought on that is if you're not making things in individual portions, then have them pre-cut so that people are serving them individually. So you may want to buy a lot of those cupcake liners and put individual portions onto the cupcake liner, so people are taking that and seeing that as a discrete entity, as opposed to the person who is going to come by and help themselves to all of the prosciutto on the plate and leave all of the other things. And
Sure.
we don't necessarily, yeah, somebody would do that. And a lot of the things that can go on the day board can be made in advance. Did you know that a cooler can also be used to keep things warm? If you put warm things in the cooler, and I tend to line mine with a towel and take things from my oven at home, put it in the cooler, and then I can use it at the site and it's already cooked. That would be an idea to keep some things warm.
that's actually really cool because our 12th night oven always has, it's sassy. So it works sometimes, it doesn't work other times. So yeah, okay.
Okay.
I definitely know that in the Outlands, we've had a few investiture lunches. So the lunch is the day board, and then the feast is a sit-down deal. Tarts of both savory and sweet styles have been very common in those. And it again, because they're discrete, they're small, they're identifiable. We usually label them so you can tell this one is a savory, this one is a sweet. So for folks who are watching whatever. I'm trying to think what we did with cold cuts. I think I have seen some kind of charcuterie style day boards.
Okay.
But again, you got to watch out for the person who comes in and takes all of the sausage. So you got to keep mind of that. Things that also can be served lukewarm are also beneficial, I've found, because you have to keep track of food safety. Like if it's something that has to be served cold, you don't want to have it laying out on the board all afternoon. And if it's something that needs to be served hot, again, same thing. It's going to cool down a bit too much.
Right. Awesome. Thank you guys. I appreciate that.
Okay, I'm gonna go through the rest of my part here. When you go to a sit-down feast and you sit down, people who sit down are hungry. I like my openings so people can have munchies. They don't necessarily wait for the crown to start eating once they get their place settings and who's sitting where and what feast gear is out and everything. And that takes the edge off of their appetite. I like to have bread, butter, soft cheese, or hummus if you're doing Middle Eastern. Carrot, celery, olive, hard cheese chunks, grapes, strawberries, seasonal fruit that are small, those little teeny tangerines. Those are all things that people can just grab. They might be good for your day board, you know, that kind of a thing. And I have seen a huge charcuterie board in, it's north of Vontier. And it's another A kingdom, and I should know it.
Avocado?
Avocado. I went up there and they had this beautiful charcuterie plate with cheeses, and there must have been 5 different kinds of cheeses and 5 different kinds of meat cut out. And the problem I had with that is so many people wouldn't eat this or wouldn't eat that. And once it goes out, it's gone out. And so I'm sure they had a lot of food waste on that. Again, I'm the frugal person. I want to see food waste. Okay. Your first course, you want something filling. Soups are often good. A nice hearty soup, not a thin soup. And people are used to soup and salad at the beginning of the meal just because that's the way the Americans eat it. And that's not the way our medieval folk would like to eat it. But a hearty soup, etc. For solstice, I had my pomegranate chicken and roasted Mediterranean vegetables, and it went over very well. Then when I served my expensive lamb stew over the noodles or rice for those who were gluten intolerant, they didn't have 2 scoops of the lamb because they were a little bit more full, and there was only like 2 small sandwich bags of leftovers for that. It was a good choice for that portion size, and there wasn't a lot of leftovers and waste. I've also found that too many courses, 3, 4, 5, and 6, people just are not used to pacing themselves to be able to handle more than a 3-course meal. And I've reverted back now to a 2-course, the openings and then 2 courses. And then I like to keep my desserts light. I like something fancy. You know, there's always room for dessert. And even small portions can be made very memorable. And people who have something memorable at the end of their feast are able to say, oh, I remember that Turkish delight was great, or whatever. And so make your feast memorable, and you don't have to spend an arm and a leg. And I can't think of what I haven't said other than perhaps you want to check with the foodies in your area to find out where they might buy some. I know back in Baltimore, my friends had access to the restaurant supply house, and they used to be able to get the nice rounds of brie for very, very inexpensive prices, whereas I have to pay Costco price. That's the cheapest I've seen. Any other questions? Because we are now at 2 minutes from being done time.
Actually, I got a quick question on the soft cheeses. Do
Yeah.
those go over well? And are those fresh made or are they store-bought?
Both. I tend to make mine the day before, but they can also be made on site. And they're very easy to make. Have you made any?
I have, yeah.
Yes, they're very easy to make and spice, and people tend to enjoy perhaps a class on making fresh cheeses if you can squeeze that in, and then you get your cheese made and you also teach people something.
Okay.
And I also tend to use fresh herbs if I have them from my garden, at least during the non-dead of winter time.
During herb season.
Yes.
I also wanted to just make a comment on the bread aspect. We had a feast where they made pita on site. It was a very small feast, but it was only about 60 people, but they were able to make the pita on site, just sort of throwing them through the oven. And it worked out pretty well, so.
And that again is possible. I know at Cooks and Bards, which took place Labor Day it was in Southern Illinois, right north of St. Louis. One of their classes was on pie crusts, and they made all sorts of pies by having the class participants make the pie. And making flatbread on site is fine as long as you have a way to do that. Sometimes the kitchen space that we have isn't the same.
Definitely.
Yeah. Anyone else? Well, I hope you all have learned something from my monologue here. And thank you to those who have asked questions. And if you ever get to Australia, the foodie you want to eat with is Drake, because he's a wonderful person. And when I was in his encampment for the last Rowani Festival, he accommodated gluten-free, lactose-free, vegan, as well as idiots like me who are only allergic to rabbit. And he was able to make it all work in his kitchen. And Master Drake is wonderful. So thank you all for joining me. And if there are no more questions, if anybody has a question, go now. But we've got 9 minutes until the next classes start. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've also heard when coming to find good feasting, if you go to West Ontario War, look out for the Cook's encampment. Apparently, period food is tasty, and they have quite a bit of it.
I was told that also.
Not necessarily frugal, but tasty.
Yes.
It's frugal if you're eating it because it's all free if you're eating it.
True. It doesn't go to waste. Actually, that was a question I was going to have. It's kind of ancillary. With the solstice feast you were talking about here, what was the leftovers? Were there very many? Or did you size the portions to make sure, like, I know there's going to be fewer people eating the lamb at the end, so therefore I need to buy less lamb, so there was less lamb left?
Yes. I also, when I took the chicken, I wanted a recognizable serving piece. And I didn't think a thigh or a leg by itself would be adequate. And so that's why I had the thigh and the leg. And people we had people seating at tables of 8, and there were 8 legs and thighs put in the bowl or platter that went out to that table. And so people were able to recognize the serving size.
As a question for you on kind of the logistics of serving food itself, do you find it easier to have servers serving the food or more of a serve yourself? Or does it just depend on you?
While it is wonderful to have servers, what works out most often in the feasts that I go to is one person from each table goes and gets the portion of food for that table. I personally prefer that over a buffet line, because buffet lines, people at the end of the buffet line are starving when the people who started out first are already done, unless you have several lines where people can go through rapidly. And so we used to have the children do the serving, and we had nice tabards for them, but then they didn't want to do that. And then the children who were trained wouldn't train the new people. And so if children want to come up, they can always water. There's always something for them to do. But having the servers from each table works out well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One thing I've noticed on some of the feasts that we've done, particularly when it comes to soups, is it really depends on how you send the soup out. There have been feasts that have gone kind of okay, where they have sent the one soup pot around to give everyone the soup. It makes sure you don't have to worry about spilling a small bowl, 12 small bowls of soup per table, but it also takes forever. So the soup is cold by the time you get to the last table, versus having a thicker soup that goes out in a per platter bowl, and then at each table you get to dish your own soup, but then you have to make sure that the barony or the shire has serving utensils to be able to distribute with the plates.
Unless you're an Armatel freak like me, and I have like 8 Armatel dishes, and I to bring my own.
All right, 5 till everyone. It's time to get ready for your next classes. Thank you so much.
Hey,
Thank
look,
you again, Your Excellency.
Casamira,
you.
just really quick, I wanted to say hi and thank you so much for doing the class. I love you.
You're welcome.